When we picture the Middle Ages, the mind immediately goes to galloping knights, towering stone castles, and a pristine code of chivalry. But beneath that romantic veneer is a very different reality. The medieval era was defined by disease, brutal warfare, and catastrophic food shortages. In the 14th century alone, the Kingdom of France suffered through 10 distinct recorded famines. When those food supplies completely evaporated during massive sieges or prolonged droughts, desperate populations resorted to an unthinkable extreme to stay alive: the consumption of human flesh. Yet, eating another human being in the Middle Ages occurred across an incredibly complex spectrum. It ranged from the traumatic, maddening desperation of a locked-down city to highly celebrated medical treatments endorsed by the intellectual elite. The records from this era document a total dissolution of the social contract. In the void left by failing systems, people were forced to redefine what was acceptable, often in ways that seem impossible from the safety of the modern world. Nowhere was that shift more obvious than during the brutal siege warfare of the Crusades, as vast armies fought to control the Holy Land. A siege forces a population to watch its food supply vanish in agonizingly slow motion. First, the granaries empty. Then, the inhabitants slaughter their horses and camels. When the livestock is gone, the true desperation sets in. People would boil their leather shoes to soften them for chewing, or tear strips of hardened pitch from the sides of ships just to trick their stomachs into feeling full. In December of 1098, at the siege of Ma'ara, the breaking point arrived. Chronicles from the campaign describe crusaders driven utterly mad by hunger. In an act of sheer survival, soldiers carved pieces from the buttocks of already dead Muslim forces in the city, cooking and devouring the remains over open fires. Sometimes the desperation escalated from scavenging the dead to hunting the living. During the earlier Persian siege of Amida, Roman citizens were locked inside an amphitheater to slowly starve. Out in the streets, abandoned women secretly conspired to pull anyone they could overpower: children, the elderly, even soldiers, indoors to be killed and eaten. These atrocities triggered an immediate psychological reaction on the battlefield. Muslim commanders actively weaponized the Crusaders' actions, spreading propaganda that painted the Christian forces as cruel, inhuman predators who would literally feed on their enemies. In the total vacuum of resources, the concept of a moral failing evaporates. The ultimate taboo dissolves into a brutal, terrifying tactical necessity for survival. The systemic collapse of a famine creates a unique environment for violence. While many are driven to scavenging by necessity, others use the surrounding chaos as a shield, crossing the line into active predation. In the year 646, during a severe famine in Germanica, an imposter monk named Elisha used his fake religious authority to steal and consume 51 children from the local community. The psychological cruelty went far beyond the murders. Operating under the guise of a holy man, Elisha would brazenly visit the grieving parents after eating their children, sitting down to formally console them for their tragic loss. Around the same time in Lebanon, a group of conspirators waited for a desperately hungry mother to leave her home to forage for wild grass. The moment she was gone, they murdered her baby, cooked it, and ate it. Famine actively selects for the ruthless. When society's watchful eyes are blinded by hunger, serial predators find the perfect cover to exercise unchecked violence. But survival and predation only cover half the story. In completely functioning, stable European societies, eating human remains was a matter of choice. It was actively sought out as a legitimate medical treatment. The origins of this medical magic stretch back to the Roman Empire. Romans believed that drinking the warm blood drawn straight from the wounds of a dying gladiator could cure brain disorders like epilepsy. By the 13th century, this practice had evolved into formal science. The highly acclaimed Scottish scholar Michael Scott confidently prescribed bathing in the blood of either a dog or a 2-year-old infant as a definitive cure for leprosy. This medical angle even cast the carnage of the Crusades in a different light. Far from the starving masses, Christian and Muslim soldiers alike were known to deliberately harvest the gallbladders of their dead enemies, believing the organs possessed magical healing properties. The scientific and intellectual elite of the era effectively laundered a horrific act. They proved that with enough formal backing, authority figures can rebrand the ultimate taboo into an accepted, even celebrated cure. Moving east to the Tang dynasty in China, we see an entirely different motivation. Here, society was structured around the cultural mandate of filial piety, the absolute devotion, love, and respect required for one's parents and ancestors. Under this specific cultural framework, the consumption of human flesh carried no association with starvation or dark magic. Instead, it was viewed as an extreme, voluntary medical offering. Young women, primarily daughters-in-law, would endure an intense ritualistic process. They would tie off their limbs with a tourniquet, take a sharp knife, and intentionally slice pieces of flesh from their own upper arms or thighs. This harvested human meat was immediately cooked into a hot soup. It was then served to their sick or dying parents as a desperate, loving attempt to heal them through physical sacrifice. Context dictates morality. Depending entirely on the prevailing cultural lens, the exact same act that defines barbaric cruelty in one part of the world becomes the highest possible expression of familial love in another. When you place the traumatic, maddening starvation of a besieged crusader directly alongside the voluntary, celebrated medical rituals of medieval Europe and China, a distinct pattern emerges. This diagram illustrates that the ultimate human taboo is not a fixed, universal law of nature. It is entirely conditional, sliding back and forth based on the stability of the environment and the current cultural framework. History clearly demonstrates that human morality is inextricably tied to agricultural and systemic success. When the complex systems that feed and organize us collapse, the rules that govern us vanish right alongside them. The moral boundaries of modern civilization only exist because of our current systemic stability. It is a haunting reminder that we are all, ultimately, only ever a few missed meals away from the Middle Ages.